Thank you very much, Professor Chikawa, and a big thank you for that introduction. I think you've actually given me quite a difficult job here, but I'll see how maybe we can answer some of the questions. But Professor David Caterera gave me a task to talk here today about neglected foods, and gave me the task of talking about neglected foods will save the world. So I'm Roseanna Avento, and from the University of Eastern Finland. I work there as a global development manager. And I also do research on food security and the role of higher education. So I've been working with higher education institutions on food security, and neglected foods actually came into our paths. And this is the experience that I will be talking about today, and thinking about how can neglected foods save the world. But this brings me to then a question I want to pose, maybe in answer to the question of what are neglected foods. And so we can go change the slide, and we look at my question, which is, once upon a time, what did we eat? And this is a question perhaps all of you could take a moment to think about. And I do ask this question a lot, and it's interesting to hear the answers when you think about what did we eat? What's our traditional food? A lot of people will go, oh, it's ugali, it's shima, or whatever you call it in your native language. And so we're coming back to maize, or it's something to do with rice or wheat. But if you actually think about that, those are not our traditional foods. They came from somewhere else. And when we have paleontologists and archaeologists going back into history, they tell us that the original diet of early humankind was actually very, very simple. We had, Prof, you can click one more as each one as we go. So foods like fruits and berries, nuts, insects, and all of these were collected from the surroundings. And some people still do collect these from the surroundings. And these were what were consumed. And insects actually provided very valuable proteins and fats. Fruits and vegetable and berries provided vitamins that humans needed. A gentleman called Tobias actually has an interesting saying here, and that's that the kitchen was actually in the mouth, and the teeth provided the tools to prepare the food. But yeah, so this is how we started. But from the very, very beginning of human history, food has assumed enormous social, religious, cultural, environmental, and even commercial significance. And food has had a huge transformative role, and has been is a foundation for entire civilizations. Adoption of agriculture made civilizations possible, and made the lifestyles that we have possible. Staple crops supported the first civilizations, which were based on barley, wheat. This is in the Near East, millet in Africa, rice in Asia, and maize and potatoes in the Americas. So that's what we ate. And our early ancestors, though they had to forage and hunt for food, they were forced to work together to maximize the food production. So this is basically what food is. It's not just something that we eat, but it's social, it's religious, cultural, environmental. And with food, different members of the communities had different specialist roles. Some people had, performed certain tasks. And then a revolution occurred, fire. So we harnessed fire, and that resulted into a transition to cooking. And then when we started to cook, our diets became more diverse. So, cooking eliminated microbes that caused food poisoning. As diets became more diverse, the biological development of humans also was affected. So our jaws became smaller, our brains became bigger, our intestines became smaller. So food became softer and safer and far more nutritious after we cooked. And this started to then, the changes between humans and food supply then became a catalyst for social and technological advances. And you can see this from early history. If you go back to Mesopotamia, now what we'd call Iraq, Kuwait, Syria, that region, that's where they first, the oldest lists of the different types of foods available have been found. And these lists actually tell us what meals were served to whom, the significance of meal times to social organization and religion. And something that's interesting is that, social elite ate a main meal in the morning and in the evening, and then they had two smaller meals. Laborers ate only two meals, for instance. So, at royal banquets, guests were seated according to a strict hierarchy arranged by profession, ethnicity, and status. And you can still see this in present day when you interact with each other. What I'm trying to say here now is that food is cultures, it's people, it's beliefs, and it's our behaviors. Now, when you talk about culture, this is something quite interesting. It's something that, individuals come together voluntarily for certain purposes that they can only achieve through cooperation. And this means, we're talking about political, the economic, artistic, scientific, and even religious issues. So food is very, very, very subjective, and it affects us all. And that comes then, we come down to the question, what is, why are certain foods being called neglected? Who neglected them? Well, we did. We, as people in certain areas, neglect certain foods for certain reasons. My own grandmother, for instance, didn't eat fish because she believed that fish would make you stupid. So, she doesn't eat fish, and that belief is probably unfounded. It's definitely unfounded. But this was a belief she had and her community around her had. So they didn't eat fish. So while there would be food, they didn't have access to that food. And that does affect, food security and how we behave. Okay, next slide. Then we come to innovation. And what is innovation? And this is something people always have questions about. And there's 5 different types of innovation. So innovations could be you launch a new product, or you apply a new method to producing a product or sales of a product, or you open a new market where it has not yet been, or you acquire new sources or supply of raw material, or then you have a new industry structure. So innovation can be all of these things. And this is where it comes interesting when it comes to food, because there is so many different types of innovations we can come up with when we're talking about food. So when we're talking about food, there's drivers for innovation. And these drivers really are, first of all, 75% of plant genetic diversity has been abandoned. 90% of our calories and protein and fat are provided by only 50 crops in the world, but we have so much more to offer. And we're more dependent on the same staple crops that we were 50 years ago. And these are rice, maize, and wheat. That's what we depend on. And if you look back on what you had for lunch today, or this morning, or yesterday, you're going to find rice, maize, or wheat somewhere in between that. I'm quite sure. This is what is driving us to innovation. But what's the beef? What are the problems? Well, first of all, people are very picky eaters. So you might even think of a child and you trying to get a kid to eat vegetables, or trying to make people choose a vegan meal instead of a meat meal. So people are very, very picky and very they're very, very concerned about what they eat. Whenever you go to a new place, what am I going to eat? People struggle with this. Then you look at food and plants and the flora and the fauna. A lot of species that are edible have had very little scientific attention. A lot of attention has gone into maize, rice, and wheat, and more of the common products, but a lot of the other species that we could consume have not been investigated a lot. And then we don't know the culinary qualities of many plants. And well, of course, there's always money. Money is always a problem. We as food product developers, actually, we need to create supply and demand. And how do we do this? We have to look at the trends, and these are some of the trends that you see going around now. There's a lot of people who are following protein-rich diets, gluten-free cuisines, very in non-wheat food products, beverages, and plant-based foods, plant-based milks. Veganism is definitely something that's trendy, and these are what we need to look at when we're looking at food markets. So we have to look at what are people wanting, but then at the same time, can we also create demand for foods? And what we've been working with crops mainly at the moment. We've been looking at quinoa, which is also called goosefoot, or chiesa mama, which is the mother grain. Millet, amaranthus, also called as the never fading one, and aloe. And there are many reasons why these have been selected a lot for the nutritive properties. And because they've been basically underutilized. But of course, now we're seeing a lot of products made with quinoa, made with amaranthus, because of booms and trends. Have been like the rediscovery of these crops again, and which has then also had effects like very rising prices. So for instance, quinoa, which originates in the Andes region, and amaranthus as well, was grown by the Aztecs. Quinoa was grown by the Andeans. And when there's a Spaniard who went to the Andes region and the Aztec region and found these crops being grown there, just very widely, and these crops were revered. They were crops for the gods, actually, and they wanted to introduce Christianity. So with the introduction of Christianity, and they saw these crops being offered to the gods, what they did was they said, let's burn them down. And they burnt down the quinoa fields, they burnt down the amaranthus fields, and then brought in maize and wheat and started planting that. And so these became neglected crops in a sense, because it wasn't, they were neglected, put aside in favor of maize and wheat, because it was seen as a sin or paganism to grow these. And then it also became food for the poor people, because the colonialists, the Spaniards, who came into that region, came in with wealth and power. And to be seen as a wealthy, powerful person, you needed to emulate the colonizer. And in that effect, then you don't eat quinoa, you don't eat amaranthus, and you eat maize or wheat. And this is why some of our foods have been put aside. And it's the same thing in many African regions. Our sima, shima, ugali, it's food for the poor. When you become rich, then you're going to McDonald's and eating pasta and French fries and hamburgers and more of the Western foods. So in a way, this is the story of how foods became neglected and put aside in favor of others. But now they're being rediscovered, and people finding out that these are very, very nutritious. Can we make products from them? And now you can see quinoa in pretty much all the supermarkets in Europe, in the US, and the prices are high. So now in Bolivia, in Peru, they grow a lot of quinoa. and they export it to the US and to Europe. But at the same time, then you see prices rising as well in South America, to an effect that people can't actually, those who grow it can't actually afford this. A similar situation happened with teff in Ethiopia, but the Ethiopian government came in and said that, okay, now we're going to restrict the export of teff because our local people, that's their food and that's what they survive on, and we can't have the prices going up. So these are really huge policy issues which come in when, you know, people rediscover the underutilized crops and realize how nutritious they are, but we need to also protect those who actually grow, the farmers who grow these crops. And what I see then is, you know, there's a lot of value added when you're looking at underutilized crops or neglected crops. They're, you know, very nutritionally diverse. There's a lot of indigenous knowledge related to these crops used. They thrive in very difficult situations. And we, you know, you can use a lot, not just the fruit or the flowers, but, you know, all of the crop. And we do know that at least 7,000 species of plants can be eaten by humans. So my message here is basically that we need to make space for indigenous knowledge. We need to use indigenous knowledge when we're producing products with indigenous foods. And we also need to document. There's a lot of information that's undocumented. We call different crops, different fruit, different vegetables, the same, you know, different names in different cultures, and we use them very differently. And there's a wide space of space for co-creation between actors in the South, where we have all of these wonderful foods available. So our job as researchers, as food producers and innovators, is to make space for indigenous knowledge. And this is what we've been doing. We've been having actors in Kenya, South Africa, Peru, and Finland. And we've been working with higher education enterprises and NGOs and governments coming together and brainstorming and creating all of these different food products that you can see there up, from quinoa, from amaranthus, from, you know, we've had maponi worms, aloe moringa was mentioned in the beginning of the session as well. And I actually do see that one of our participants, Joyce, is here, that was actually involved in making rolls from energy rolls from quinoa, which is quite interesting. So this is, you know, we're coming together from all of these different countries and exchanging information and coming up with different products, and then seeing how we could scale them up, or, you know, and get them to market, and how, you know, also looking into the different culinary attributes into the different foods. So these networks are what we've formed, and actually, so we've been doing this work for quite a long time, since 2015, and we've created local, regional, and global networks, and they are interacting in very different ways. There's been regional expansions of businesses. Academia has been present in almost all of the engagement with communities. But one thing that we've found out is food culture is very, very regional. There's lots of restrictions on food trade, a lot of restrictions, a lot of issues with IPRs. And then funding is always very, very difficult. It varies a lot regionally. So these are some of the challenges we've had. But we've definitely managed to create intercontinental and cross-country networks within the work that we've done. This is our new initiative. So our university, Tshwane University of Technology, and then La Molina University from Peru, and then Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology from Kenya, and University Innovations Global are coming together to form the Global Food Net, where we will be continuing our work and basically telling the stories of these food innovations over the next autumn. So you will be able to follow us on Facebook through Global the Food Net. You can write to me at uf.fi. Follow me on Twitter, and there on Twitter I also have a hashtag IYFV. This year is the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables, and I've made it an issue that I post about a fruit or vegetable every week and its origins. And basically the idea is to kind of have people think about where does your food come from and what it is its origins, because it's always not very, you might think that your food is from somewhere, but it's from somewhere else, and there's a lot of different histories to the different types of food. So that's where you can get more information on us, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Roseanna. So food is social, it's cultural, it's religious, it's behavioral. So we are what we eat. Thank
Absolutely.
you very much. And we'll make space for indigenous food. I'm very convinced of that. So
Super.
Thank you very much. So just a reminder that if you have any questions, put them on the chat box. I can see already some comments in there on you should make food. It has to be attractive and it should be easy to cook. And I like that. So our next speaker is Paida Mataranyika. She's coming from University of Namibia, and she'll be talking about marama bean.